Imagine trying to protect a secret today, knowing that someone could capture it, store it for years maybe, and then decrypt it super easily using a computer that doesn't even exist yet.
Right.
That might sound, I don't know, a bit like science fiction, but it's actually a very real concern driving this huge global effort in cryptography right now. We're talking about the potential threat from future quantum computers.
Yeah.
And the race to develop what's called post-quantum, or you might hear quantum-resistant cryptography.
Yep.
So today, we're diving deep into this stack of sources you've given us, articles, research notes, official government info, to really unpack what this threat is, who's leading the charge to deal with it, particularly the work it missed, and what it all means for you.
That's right. And the foundation, of so much of our current digital security, it relies on public key encryption.
Right, like for websites, secure emails.
Exactly. Securing websites, encrypted emails, digital signatures, all that stuff. These methods are built on mathematical problems that are just incredibly hard, like practically impossible, for our normal conventional computers to solve quickly.
Things like factoring huge numbers.
Yeah, factoring very large numbers or solving discrete logarithm problems. Really tough stuff for classical machines.
And the game changer here is the theoretical power of a big enough, stable enough quantum computer. Specifically, algorithms like Shor's algorithm, which I understand are designed to solve exactly those kinds of math problems, relatively easily.
Yeah, easily compared to classical computers, absolutely. And the direct consequence, if such a quantum computer existed today, it could potentially just shatter the public key encryption that protects, vast amounts of sensitive data across the globe.
Okay, now, it's important to put this in perspective, right? Is this some kind of sudden crisis? Do we need to panic about our passwords and files being broken, like, tomorrow?
Based on everything we're seeing in the sources, absolutely not. Quantum computers that are actually powerful enough to run Shor's algorithm at the scale needed to break something like RSA or ECC, they just don't exist yet.
Okay.
They're still many years off, maybe even decades away from being a practical threat to the encryption we use right now. It's definitely not a Y2K situation where everything breaks on a specific date.
Okay. So if the threat isn't here today, why is there such an urgent focus on this now? Why all this effort from NIST and others?
Yeah, that's the key question. The core reason is what's often called the migration problem. It just takes an incredibly long time, potentially years, maybe a decade or even more, to switch out and integrate new encryption algorithms everywhere.
Everywhere, meaning?
I mean everywhere. Hardware, software, all the systems worldwide that rely on cryptography. Think browsers, operating systems, embedded devices, critical infrastructure. It's a massive job.
Yeah.
You have to start planning and developing replacements way ahead of time because the rollout itself is such a huge undertaking.
And this is where the proactive work becomes so critical. There's this idea, harvest now, decrypt later.
Exactly. And this is a major, major driver for the urgency. Sensitive info could be personal health records, financial data, government secrets, you name it, that's encrypted using our current potentially vulnerable algorithms. It could be intercepted and just stored today.
By adversaries who are betting on the future.
Precisely, betting on future quantum capabilities. Then, years from now, when those powerful quantum computers do become available, they could theoretically go back and decrypt all that data they harvested earlier.
Wow. So even data you encrypted safely yesterday could be at risk down the line if it gets scooped up now.
That's the concern. Yeah, it really highlights the long-term security view we need.
So does this quantum threat hit all types of cryptography the same way, or is it mostly focused on certain kinds?
It's mainly a concern for public key cryptography, the kind used for establishing keys and for digital signatures. The symmetric algorithms, like AES and hash functions, they're generally seen as much more robust against quantum attacks. There's Grover's algorithm, which could theoretically speed up attacks on symmetric ciphers, but you can counter that pretty effectively just by increasing the key size.
Like using AES 256 instead of AES 128.
Exactly. Using AES 256 provides plenty of security margin. And symmetric keys also tend to be much smaller than many of the proposed post-quantum public keys, which is, a nice practical advantage.
Got it. So the real heavy lifting is needed for those public key systems. Which brings us to the really crucial work being done by places like NIST.
Right. NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology. It's a U.S. government agency, but they have deep, deep roots in quantum science and a long track record of setting crypto standards.
Like DES and AT.
Yeah, DES, triple DS, AES, those big standards often came out of NIST processes, influencing practice globally. So for years now, they've been working with cryptographers, security experts all over the world to find, evaluate, and standardize new encryption methods designed specifically to resist attacks from future quantum computers.
But they also have to work on today's computers,
Oh,
right?
absolutely. They have to be practical to use on our current classical hardware. That's essential.
And this all led to their big multi-year post-quantum cryptography standardization project.
That's the one. They formally kicked it off back in 2016, put out a call to experts worldwide, send us your best ideas for quantum-resistant algorithms, and they got nearly 70 submissions back.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a huge response. And what's really interesting, I think, is the process itself. It's been incredibly open, very transparent. Cryptographers from everywhere, academia, industry, government, they've all been pounding on these candidate algorithms, trying to break them over multiple rounds of evaluation.
Like a public stress test?
Exactly. It's that tough public vetting that builds confidence in the ones that survive.
And this whole process, it's recently produced the first actual standards.
Precisely. According to the sources, NIST just published the final versions of the first 3 PQC standards in August 2024. So these are basically the world's first globally recognized tools designed to protect against this future quantum threat. They're considered ready for people to start implementing widely.
And they include all the technical details needed.
Oh, yeah. Detailed technical specs for developers, engineers, everyone who needs to build this stuff.
Okay, so can you walk us through those first 3? What are they for?
Sure. So first up is FIPS 203, which standardizes Crystal's Kyber. Think of this one primarily for general encryption, or maybe more accurately for key establishment.
Like setting up a secure website connection.
Exactly, like the TLS connections that secure websites, that kind of thing. Technically, it's a module lattice-based key encapsulation mechanism, or MLChem.
Okay, Kyber for key exchange. What's next?
Next is FIPS 204, which covers Crystal's dilithium. This one's specifically for digital signatures.
So verifying software updates, signing documents.
Yep, proving authenticity and integrity. That's dilithium's job. It's a module lattice-based digital signature standard, MLDSA.
Got it. And the third one?
The third one is FIPS 205, standardizing Sphinx ECS plus PUCs. This is also for digital signatures.
Wait, another one for signatures. Why 2?
Good question. Sphinx ECS Plus uses a totally different mathematical approach. It's based on hash functions, not lattices like dilithium, so it provides diversity. If some unexpected weakness pops up in lattice-based methods down the road, Sphinx ECS Plus offers a different kind of defense. It's a stateless, hash-based digital signature standard, SLH-DSA.
Okay, that makes sense. Backup options.
Yeah.
What about Falcon? Wasn't that also picked early on?
It was. Falcon is another digital signature algorithm, also lattice-based, but with some different characteristics. A standard for Falcon is expected to follow soon after these first 3, or at least a draft standard was anticipated around the same time.
So that's the first wave.
Yeah.
Is NIST done with PQC standardization now?
Oh, not at all. They've also picked a second group of algorithms that are still undergoing evaluation. Again, it's about providing redundancy, more diversity, having alternatives ready just in case.
So more standards could come later from that group?
Exactly. Standards for any of those second-round winners will follow later on.
And I heard that the evaluation process itself kind of proved its value during all this. Something about an algorithm called Psych.
It certainly did. The sources really highlight the cracking of Psych, which happened relatively late in the game. And the key thing wasn't just that the algorithm was broken, but how it was found.
How so?
It was broken by a conventional computer attack found through that rigorous open vetting process before it got standardized and deployed everywhere. NIST actually saw this as proof the process was working as intended.
Finding the weaknesses before they cause a massive problem.
Precisely. It showed the value of that careful, multi-year public scrutiny. It potentially saved a lot of future headaches. That's the real takeaway there. The process worked.
And I gather they're still looking for more signature algorithms.
Yes, the NIST team is definitely interested in beefing up the signature options. They're actively seeking new submissions, especially ones based on math that's different from the structured lattices used in dilithium and Falcon. They've already kicked off another public evaluation looking at, I think, 40 new submissions in that area.
And the end goal here is that these new PQC standards will eventually replace the older ones that quantum computers could break.
That's the long-term plan, yes. These new standards are meant to take over from the existing NIST standards for public key crypto, like FIPS 18625 for signatures and the SP 856 specs for key establishment, because those are the ones vulnerable to quantum attacks.
Okay, let's maybe shift gears a bit. Talk about the different kinds of math behind all these new algorithms and the practical side of actually getting them into our computers and phones and everything else.
Right. So researchers have been exploring roughly maybe 6 main families of mathematical problems that seem hard even for quantum computers. We've already mentioned lattice-based methods quite a bit.
Yeah, Kyber, dilithium, Falcon.
Exactly. Their security relies on hard problems related to these mathematical structures called lattices. Very promising area.
Then you mentioned hash-based signatures like SVNCS plus faster.
Yep, their security is basically tied to how good the underlying cryptographic hash functions are. Very well understood foundations.
Okay, what else?
Then there's code-based cryptography. The best-known example is probably the McKeely algorithm. This approach uses error-correcting codes. What's really interesting about McKeely's is the original version dates back to the late 1970s.
Wow, that's ancient in crypto terms.
It really is. And it's held up against analysis for all that time, which gives it a lot of credibility. It's often pointed to as a strong candidate for, really long-term security because of that history.
Interesting. Keep going.
Okay, then you have multivariate cryptography. This is based on how hard it is to solve systems of equations with many variables. These can be used for quantum secure digital signatures too. Next is isogeny-based cryptography. This uses some pretty advanced math involving elliptic curve isogeny graphs. Now, one specific scheme here, SIDH or psych, that's the one that got broken by a classical attack.
The one we talked about earlier.
Exactly. But the break didn't kill the whole field. Research is still going on with other isogeny approaches like CSIDH and others.
Okay. And the last one?
The last one is sort of what we touched on before, just using strong symmetric key algorithms like AES 256. As we said, with a big enough key, these are generally considered quantum resistant already.
So quite a few different approaches being explored.
Definitely. Gives us options. But one practical thing that comes up with many of these new PQC algorithms is key size.
Ah, yeah. You mentioned symmetric keys were smaller.
Right. Compared to the RSA or ECC keys we use now, many of the new PQC public keys, and sometimes the signatures too, can be significantly larger.
How much larger?
Well, it varies a lot. Some lattice schemes like Kyber have pretty reasonable key sizes, maybe under a kilobyte, which is manageable. But then you look at something like certain versions of McKeely's, and the public key can be closer to a megabyte.
Whoa. Okay, that's a big difference.
It is. And that creates real trade-offs. You have to think about bandwidth needed to send keys, storage space, how much computation it takes to use them. It's a practical headache.
That sounds like a definite hurdle. So even once we have the standards, actually getting these new algorithms deployed out there into the real world, that sounds like the really tough part.
It's arguably the biggest challenge of this whole transition, the implementation and deployment phase. Just think about updating all the software libraries, the operating systems, the hardware security modules, countless apps. It's going to take years.
So how do we manage that?
Well, there are efforts to help. Projects like Open Quantum Safe or OQS, they're doing crucial work developing open source libraries like Glibbox that actually implement these PQC candidates, and they work on integrating them into tools developers already use, like OpenSSL.
So making it easier for developers to start testing and preparing.
Exactly. Giving them the tools to experiment and figure out how to integrate PQC into their own systems.
And this brings us to something you hear mentioned a lot, hybrid encryption.
Yes. This is super important and widely seen as the practical way forward for a lot of systems during the transition.
So what is it exactly?
Hybrid encryption basically means you combine a new quantum-resistant algorithm with a well-established traditional one like ECC or RSA. You essentially encrypt or sign with both.
Okay, why do that?
It gives you a safety net, a robust defense. If, hypothetically, the new PQC algorithm is later found to have some non-quantum bug or weakness, like what happened with Psych, the traditional layer is still there protecting your data.
Ah, I see.
And conversely, if or when a powerful quantum computer arrives and breaks the traditional layer, the PQC layer is supposed to provide the security. So you get the best of both worlds during this, uncertain transition period.
And we're actually seeing big companies using this hybrid approach already.
Absolutely. Google's a great example. They've run experiments using hybrid encryption in protocols like TLS for secure connections, and they've implemented it in some of their recent FIDO2 security keys, mixing dilithium with standard elliptic curve crypto.
And their experience with Psychic getting broken actually proved the value of the hybrid approach.
It really did. Because they were using it in a hybrid mode in some tests, the fact that Psych itself was broken didn't actually expose the data the traditional layer still held up. It was a real-world validation. Signal Messenger also uses a hybrid method called PQXDH.
And Apple just made a big splash recently with iMessage, right?
They did, yeah. Back in February 2024, Apple announced they're upgrading iMessage to a new protocol they're calling PQ3. And they're making some strong claims about it.
Like what?
They're saying PQ3 is the first messaging protocol used at scale to reach what they define as Level 3 security. The key is that it combines PQC for establishing the initial keys with continuous, ongoing rekeying during the conversation.
Rekeying, meaning generating new keys constantly.
Yeah, frequently generating fresh keys. This provides really strong proactive protection against that harvest now, decrypt later threat. Because even if an adversary somehow compromises keys used later, they can't decrypt past messages, and future messages will use new keys again.
So it limits the damage significantly.
Exactly. Apple says they plan to roll PQ3 out fully across iMessage by the end of 2024. They even came up with their own security level scale for messaging apps, level 0 to level 3. It's a very visible, real-world PQC implementation happening right now.
That ongoing rekeying sounds related to another important concept in secure communication: forward secrecy.
Right, yeah, they're closely related ideas. Forward secrecy is this property where you generate unique random session keys for each specific communication session or even individual message.
And why is that so important?
It's crucial because it means if someone steals your long-term private key, like the main key stored on your device, they can't use it to go back and decrypt all your past conversations. If one session key gets broken, maybe just that one session or message is compromised, not everything. It's vital protection against mass surveillance, or the fallout if a device gets hacked. So security experts strongly recommend using key exchange methods that provide forward secrecy.
And some of these new PQC algorithms can do that?
Yes, particularly the ones designed for key exchange, like Kyber. They are intended to support forward secrecy when implemented correctly in protocols.
Okay, so we've covered a lot. The future threat, the work being done, the new standards, the challenges of putting it all into practice. If you're listening right now, what's the main takeaway? What should you be doing or thinking about today?
Yeah, based on the guidance we're seeing in these sources, there are maybe 4 key things to keep in mind right now.
Okay.
First, and maybe most importantly, don't panic. Seriously, the quantum threat that can break today's strong encryption isn't here yet. Your data protected with good current methods is still safe against today's computers.
Good. What's second?
Second, keep encrypting. Keep using robust, standard encryption methods wherever you can. They're still your best defense against all the current threats out there. Don't abandon ship.
Makes sense.
Third, stay informed. Keep an eye on the progress. Follow what NIST is doing with standardization. Watch how the PQC rollout happens. Understand that this is a big transition and it's going to take time. Just being aware is important.
And finally,
plan ahead. This is especially true if you manage digital systems or infrastructure for an organization, or maybe even if you have complex personal setups. Start thinking about your systems. Where's cryptography used? What software, what hardware might eventually need upgrading or replacing once these new PQC standards become widely available and recommended?
because that migration effort is the real bear.
It really is. It's likely a multi-year effort for many organizations. So understanding your own environment, doing that inventory, that's really step 1 in getting ready.
Got it. It also seems really clear that this work on post-quantum crypto isn't just happening in a vacuum. It's part of a much bigger picture, a huge effort at NIST related to quantum information science, or QIS.
Absolutely. NIST's PQC work is one really critical piece, but it sits within their much broader program in QIS.
And how do they define QIS in this context? What does that umbrella cover?
Well, QIS is generally seen as this convergence of quantum physics and information theory. And the belief among experts is that it has the potential to spark a technological revolution, maybe as transformative as classical computers and the internet were.
Wow. That's a big claim.
It is, but the promise spans across so many areas, not just cryptography and secure comms, but potentially huge advances in discovering new materials, developing drugs, financial modeling, navigation, building entirely new kinds of sensors, new ways of computing. The list goes on.
So NIST sees its role as helping build the foundation for that whole revolution.
Yes, that's a big part of their mission in QIS. They focus on developing the essential measurement science. How do you actually measure and characterize these quantum phenomena reliably? They develop the fundamental tools and, importantly, the standards that are needed to support the growth of a U.S. quantum industry and also ensure national security in this new quantum era. They're also a key player in the U.S. National Quantum Initiative Act.
And how do they connect with everyone else working in this space? Industry, universities?
They're deeply integrated. They work very closely with industry through groups like the Quantum Economic Development Consortium, the QEDC, which has over 250 members now, and they have really strong ties with universities through joint institutes like JLA in Colorado, the Joint Quantum Institute, JQI, and the Joint Center for Quantum Information and Computer Science, QUICS, both in Maryland.
So fostering collaboration.
Exactly, bringing physicists, computer scientists, engineers together. These partnerships are vital for pushing the research forward.
And their own research in QIS, it goes way beyond just the BQC algorithms, right?
Oh, definitely. Their internal programs cover a huge spectrum. They do fundamental research on different ways to build quantum computers, trapped ions, superconducting circuits, other approaches. They work on building quantum networks for communication, developing ultrasensitive quantum sensors. They maintain the world's best atomic clocks, which are crucial for timekeeping and navigation and rely on quantum principles. And they're also actively working on developing the skilled workforce needed for this whole field through educational programs and outreach.
So it really sounds like NIST's quantum science work is about building the entire scaffolding, maybe. From the basic science and measurement tools all the way to standards and training people, everything that a thriving quantum ecosystem needs.
That's a great way to put it. Building that whole foundation, the underlying science, the measurement capabilities, the standards to help unlock the broad potential of quantum technology.
Well, we have definitely covered a lot of ground today. We've explored this potential future threat from quantum computers. We've looked at the really impressive, proactive global effort led by places like NIST to counter it. And we've seen how those first crucial standards for post-quantum crypto are actually here now, becoming a reality.
Yeah, and I think the key takeaway from all the sources is that, while the full-blown threat is still down the road, the standards and the tools we need for this necessary transition, they're arriving now. They're providing that foundation to secure our digital lives for the quantum era.
So, to leave you with a final thought to chew on, think about that harvest now, decrypt later problem again. The idea that data we carefully encrypt today might be laid bare years from now by a technology that doesn't even fully exist yet. What does that really tell us about the nature of security? That it's constantly evolving, that we need to defend not just against today's threats, but anticipate the capabilities of tomorrow.
Or maybe just reflect on how the mere potential of a future technology, the quantum computer, is already forcing significant tangible changes in how we build and protect our digital world right here, right now.